have you heard of digital biopsy diagnostic company? If not, today we are going to bring you Dr. Rachel Wellner, MD, MPH, FACS. She is a board-certified breast surgical oncologist, and she is the founder and CEO of Caelum Diagnostic Solutions, Inc. Now, what is this Caelum Diagnostic Solutions, Inc.? She is doing something wonderful. She has devised a technology which renders a biopsy evaluation in less than 10 minutes with 94 to 99% accuracy. That is great. While the patient is still on the procedure table. So think of it, God forbid, but if you are a breast cancer patient and you are getting operated, with her technology, she can identify 94 to 99% accuracy that, how deep or, how the breast cancer is looking like, and, how you're going to solve that problem. So with that, welcome to you, Dr. Rachel Wellner, to my podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. So nice to be here. Thank you, Anshuman.
Yeah. So take us through your background. You are a board certified oncologist surgeon. So how did you choose a medical profession as a career?
Sure. Oh, my pleasure. But by the way, remind me, I want to just make one little correction later on to the technology. Not a big, but so, my journey began, I was at Dartmouth College as an undergraduate. I discovered a passion for international health and actually spent a semester in Nicaragua, Guatemala, India, a couple of other places where I did global health. And decided early on that I really had like a yin for helping a lot of people, not just one person at a time. That being said, I then went to med school where I learned how to help one person at a time, which was obviously a very important skill. It was very important to learn all the different disease states and how to help patients. So, the 20 some odd years that I spent in medicine has been, nothing short of absolutely wonderful and fulfilling, and something that I would never have chosen to go without. But sooner or later, I segued into this sort of innovative field of entrepreneurship, which combined all of my interests, which include the global interest, the medical interest, and the exciting creative part of innovation, which is incredibly challenging. So I think that's where you get Caelum.
Super. So then, you went through your medical profession and, you became an oncologist, breast surgeon.
Yes, I cut that short. So I went to medical school because of, like I said, the global health interest. In the middle of medical school, I got a master's in public health at Columbia University. So I took a year and change off to be able to do that. Then I finished medical school, and then I went to the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, where I did my residency in general surgery. And I'm actually board certified in general surgery. After those 5 years, I did a separate year of an SSO, which is Society of Surgical Oncology trained, or rather certified training in breast oncology. So that's my path. And then after that, I spent the next, about 15 years in practice. So I've practiced mostly all over New York City and some of the metro area. So that's where most of my practice has been. I was fortunate enough to be to run several of the centers. So I also knew that I had a little bit of the bug in me for running centers and basically, being the head of the whole center. As much as work as that entailed, I really loved organizing, administrating, and all of those different components, not just but not only taking care of patients. I love taking care of patients alone, but in addition to that, I loved all the other components. So as challenging as you could make it, that's kind of what I liked. So when I discovered this, I discovered, probably the whole gamut of all the challenges, and, becoming an entrepreneur, especially in the medical device area, has been really like drinking from a fire hose. I've had to learn everything very, very quickly. So
Sure. Such an interesting career path because becoming a doctor in itself is so difficult. and from there to picking up a specialization in oncologist and becoming a breast surgeon who specializes in cancer treatment, amazing. Thank you for all your service to the humanity. It must have been a very difficult and, the path. Let's talk a little about that, because, this podcast will be broadcast and it will be viewed by so many people. If somebody wants to go into a medical profession or chooses a career to become an oncologist surgeon, what recommendation do you have for those types of students?
Sure. It's not an easy pathway, and if it's a permanent departure, I'm not certain. After I've done my time with the innovation aspect of it, whether I want to go back to operating and combine the two, that's something that I haven't yet decided, because I really do love working with my hands, and there's something miraculous about being able to use your hands, and at the end of it, you've rendered a cure for somebody. So what it entails is, when you're an undergraduate, there are a series of pre-medical requirements, and those include things like a certain level of math, calculus, or above, just different types of sciences. So inorganic and organic chemistry, at least, the different biological sciences, as well as physics. So those all have to be done during the pre-med time. If you don't do it during the pre-med time, there are post-baccalaureate programs that basically condense those courses all together, but that usually adds 2 more years to your studies. So for anybody who's thinking of doing it, it's smart to try to do it while they're still an undergraduate. After that, you apply. You have to take your MCATs, which is a specialized board exam that in order to get into medical school. In general, just to give you a little bit of reality check, you need about at least a 3.5, 3.6 GPA or above to be able to be considered for medical school. I was fortunate. I went to Dartmouth College. There are some schools in the country where you're given a little bit of a benefit, a leg up to go into medical school. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Dartmouth College or one of the Ivy League schools or something like that, was because I knew that it would sort of help me with my future endeavors afterwards. So I did go to Dartmouth, and it was a little bit easier to get into medical school after that. I then went to my state program at the University of Connecticut, and believe it or not, the state programs are very competitive because they're very cheap or free. So in order to get into those, you're competing with like 70 students. Like Harvard, for instance, takes about 250. There were 70 in my class. So believe it or not, it was quite competitive to get into the state programs. That being said, some of those state programs versus the private programs are a little bit more geared towards any field. So if you want to go into a dermatology, plastic surgery, neurosurgery, you're probably better off not going to a state program. If you go to a state program, it becomes a little bit harder. That being said, I did step up to surgery. So once I discovered surgery, there was no going back. I used my hands. And I should have probably known this because I was a musician in my early days. I played piano, flute, clarinet, and saxophone. So I knew that I loved to use my hands. And I was also a tennis player pretty avidly. So I liked that hand-eye coordination, and I probably should have known that surgery was going to be for me, but I really didn't put the 2 and 2 together until I first held a needle and a suture and first practiced on the skin, and I said, "Oh my God, I've got to do this," So I sealed my fate with another 5 years of training, as opposed to, say, 3 years for internal medicine. And after that, it's very common to do a fellowship in general surgery. Now, things are changing because it's been recognized that the training is very, very long. So a lot of the administration has combined programs. So for instance, cardiothoracic surgery now, they have a program to go directly from medical school into cardiothoracic, and it's 6 years. Formerly, it was 5 years plus 3. So it was a 3-year fellowship in addition to the 5 years. So plastic surgery is also 6 years. Instead of 5 plus 3, it's 6. So they've done that with a number of programs. Vascular surgery, also 6 years. So they've combined a lot of those programs together to make it just a little more tenable and not take so many years. And so at the end of it, you're basically done with your fellowship and you are a vascular surgeon or a cardiothoracic surgeon, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how it generally works. It's not true for all the fields, but it's true for many of the fields.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for this detailed description of somebody who is interested in going into the medical field. Now let's talk about the light bulb moment, when did it occur to you that, there is a gap here and I should do something about this treatment?
Well, it happened when I was sitting at one of my at a research meeting at one of the hospitals I was working at, and I saw them use this technology called FLIM, fluorescent lifetime imaging microscopy. And I've seen cancer up and close with such high resonance. I'd never seen it before like this, not on a mammogram, not on an MRI or ultrasound. And I just said, wow. And it was being used at the research capacity, looking at a certain drug that was blocking a certain receptor. And I thought to myself, is this being used surgically? So for margins, like what you actually talked about, or for the indication that we plan to use it for diagnostics. So actually, we're not going to be using it in my case for margins due to some engineering limitations of the FLIM. But we're going to be using it for the following. So somebody finds a suspicious lesion in a breast or in another organ, quite frankly. We're not just doing breast. We're looking at the top 5 malignancies, and then we'll look at others. But the top 5 include skin, colon, breast, prostate, and lung. So if on a chest x-ray or a mammogram, a suspicious lesion is found, the idea is that you do a biopsy and the patient is waiting and they have no idea whether they have cancer or not. And that wait is painful. It is excruciating for those patients. While they wait, they agonize, and they're convinced that they have cancer, whether they have it or not. So that was the pain point that I saw right then and there. It just sort of hit me like a bullet, like this technology needs to be used for all things defining, cancer, whether you can see cancer or not. So that's kind of what struck me. And that's when I wanted to start doing something about it at that moment. And I didn't at the time. I moved to California, but I didn't have that Silicon Valley attitude or understanding that all things might be possible kind of a thing. So on the East Coast where I was, we were very research oriented, but I suppose that I shouldn't say we weren't innovative oriented, because definitely very many people are, but it just wasn't looked at in the same way. So it took me moving out to California and forming a team, and I formed an amazing team, and we were able to sort of put this together and get this process going. So that was that aha moment for me, was when I knew I had to do something with this. And my team right now, we're working very, very hard to make this come to fruition.
Yeah. So this is how it started. So what were the logical steps after that? How did you put together your great team? And so to my little understanding, you take a biopsy and then it goes to the lab.
It goes to the lab, which takes days.
Yeah, right now. But, with your technology, it will be done just maybe in the next
minute. Yep.
Where the data will come in, and then, you can decide on a more accurate way of treating. So
that's right, Anshuman. That's that right, Anshuman. The idea is that right away you'll get hopefully an answer, yes or no. And then as this machine learning deepens, which I'm getting to the punchline, we should be able to get more specific information on that tumor, so we can tell you exactly how it gets treated. So that's kind of that's the evolution that my team is shooting for. Not just, yes, it would be an amazing moon jump just to be able to say yes, no, that there's cancer or not, but to be able to also give you that, critical, granular information that, you've got this type of cancer, this type of precancer, this aggressive cancer, this type of this is cancer that's sensitive to this type of chemotherapy, cancer that's sensitive to that, cancer that's associated with this type of genetic mutation, all that information, which we believe is buried in the tumor and can be unlocked with deep machine learning. So the idea being, what I knew first had to be done was team building. So I knew I needed myself. I needed maybe another clinician or two. I needed engineers. I needed some financial folks. That basically comprised the total of the team. And I also brought on some interesting people who are patient advocates, people who have suffered the disease before and who could actually connect me with advocacy groups so that we could actually get the patient voice into the mix, which I felt was also very important. I don't know how many companies overlooked that aspect, but it shouldn't be overlooked, especially aside from the practical realities, which are that the FDA looks at that these days, and so do CPT, reimbursement companies. But aside from that, I felt really important that the patient voice be heard so that when we design this thing, we keep the patient's perspective in mind. So that was what I started in, and then the second very step was to start our IP. So start our patent development was step number 2. So we put out 2 patents. One just got published, and one is a provisional. And then we've turned towards prototyping. So we're now in the middle of prototyping. And we're deep into fundraising so that we can get into the next steps, which include, FDA submission, developing this for CLIA acceptance, which is the step before, in my mind, before FDA submission, so that we can generate pre-FDA revenue. The development of a CPT code, which is the reimbursement code. I'm trying to think all the other steps. There's so many. Obviously the not only the building of the prototype, but the software and adding the AI components, and then the beginning of the machine learning. So a multi-center trial, first starting with one center, but then adding several centers so that we can collect data as quickly as possible and getting this on the market fast. So
sure. Sounds good. So how big is your team right now?
I have 9 core members and 14 advisors.
Okay. And all of them are based here in the US?
They are based in the US, but they're all over the country.
Sure. In today's world,
Yeah, exactly. We don't need everybody to be in one place. Yeah.
And I believe, this is something that you're developing needs a lot of funding. So how much have you raised so far?
We're on the lower end of funding. We've got about $600,000, but we're looking obviously to raise, we're almost done with our seed round, believe it or not, because we've gotten up and almost through prototyping. So whether the next 5 to 10 million comes in a seed round or in the form of a Series A, that's what we're looking for next. And that's going to be followed probably by 20 to 40 million.
Sure. And have you gotten any government grants so far?
We have not, but we're waiting to hear from a series of them. So we're waiting to hear from the DoD right now, ARPA-H, and a couple more. And we're going to be soliciting very hard for them. They're very competitive. They're not easy to get. So we're doing our best to get them. And it's always a little tricky to figure out what nuance the grants are looking for, exactly what they're looking for. So
correct. And how about R&D credit? Have you used R&D credit in the past?
I'm sorry, R&D credit?
Yeah.
I don't believe we have, no.
So the people that you have, they are on your payroll, right?
Oh, I apologize. Everybody is based on equity at this point.
Oh, so nobody is getting paid.
Right. No, everybody is equity based right now with the goal to, as soon as possible, put everybody on some form of a salary.
So just because, keep talking to so many startup founders, deep tech, machine learning, med devices, once you have employees, do get in touch with us because, we can direct you in the right direction.
That's fantastic.
R&D credit because, all the payroll taxes that you are paying can be recovered back from the IRS as a R&D credit because what you are developing, Dr. Rachel, is really deep tech, med device, or AI-based software platform for diagnostic purposes. So it comes under those.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very generous and helpful. I appreciate that. It's always it's tricky because you have to decide between, paying your people and putting more into the company. And everybody understands that the company needs to be fed first, but they also need to be fed as well. So it's a balance. It's tricky as a CEO to balance that. We'd like to get some funding off the ground for the company first, and then start paying people some salaries afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So where is the product right now?
We're at prototype phase. We have a FLIM expert. She's an operator at the Texas A&M University. She runs her own FLIM lab. She's trained at Vanderbilt undergrad and PhD, and did some time. She went to the Air Force Academy, and she's got like a White House position. And runs this amazing lab at Texas A&M. And so she's putting together the prototype. We have our OEM provider for the camera that we're using. Basically this technology, just to try to, in a nutshell, explain, when I learned more about it, and when, of course, I did my first proof of concept study, it was the size of like a Porsche. It was enormous, and had, it was about 3 by 8 feet tall and wide, and had another 2 by 4 feet of equipment on top of it. Cost about $2 million, had a lot of accessory gadgets on top of it that are not needed for our purposes. So we did prove that it absolutely worked, but we also proved that it was not going to be democratizable to the clinic because of its virtual size and cost. So we ended up finding a camera that's the size of a DigiPro, and putting it together with some of our proprietary automation. It's relatively small, so maybe 27 inches by 23 by 11 inches now, and that fits into a nice lightweight box that's aesthetically very pleasing. That will include room for the software and the AI. So being able to put together a lightweight machine like that is relatively cheap and would fit into any clinic, on any desktop, on any rolling machine that can be rolled into the patient's room if need be, is the real innovation, I would say. Again, a lot needs to happen, like that automation needs to happen, the software component needs to happen, and the AI component needs to happen, but all of it is a straight line for us. We know exactly what we're doing, and we know exactly how we're going to get it done. There is a lot of secret sauce embedded in what we're getting done, but we know exactly what to do. So the fact is that that's kind of what we're focused on doing right now. And what's being done right now is the building of a microscope, plus the addition of that camera, and then automation. Once we can optimize the optics of what we're looking at, then we can start piecing that together with the software and the AI. It's sort of nonsensical to try to start doing that when we don't have a perfect picture yet. So we want to have a perfect picture. Once we can look at the whole cancer, or look at the whole specimen rather, length, depth, and height, or whatever. Then we know we can see the whole thing, and we're looking at the whole thing so we don't miss any areas. And once we know that we have that, that's when we can determine a conclusion about what we're looking at, and whether we've got cancer or no cancer. And the FLIM is very cool the way it works. It actually looks at the metabolism of cancer versus non-cancer, and can tell these minute differences between cancer and even benign cells, and even abnormal cells, all the way up to cancer cells, all the way up to aggressive cells, et cetera, et cetera. So those differences in metabolism, and it makes sense because what cancer is its cell growth that's out of control. So how out of control is that cell growth? How fast is it moving? How fast is it dividing? How fast is it spreading? That's a metabolic question. And that's what our technology takes advantage of, is looking at those differences in metabolism. And in that sense, it makes it a one-of-a-kind technology. It's we have a couple of competitors that are looking at properties of cancer versus properties of non-cancer, but we're looking at the very thing that makes it cancer as the determinant, which is a competitive advantage for various reasons. One is because it gives you a quantitative value, and another is because, believe it or not, after death of the cell, which is what happens when you do a biopsy, the cell dies, it doesn't have a blood supply anymore. Metabolism continues on for a time after death. And we've determined that in our technology, it continues for 8 hours after death of the cell. So you can still render a picture and a value, that quantitative value I just told you, for 8 hours after you've removed that cell. So after you've performed that biopsy. And that is a game changer.
Sure, it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you want to do with this company? What would be the end game?
A lot of people ask me, are we exiting? Are we IPOing? Or so we don't envision ourselves as we've called the equipment the Rapid X, Rapid Pathology Intraprocedural Diagnosis. That's what it stands for. So because the Rapid X includes the FLIM component as our sort of core technology or motor, but it adds all the other components that I've talked about, the software, the AI, and the automation. So the Rapid X, we don't picture ourselves as Rapid X manufacturing company. We don't want to have a plant and a big company that produces these things. So we'll likely outsource and then in-house a lot of our procedures. So at the end of the day, will we be an exit? We'd like to be a very high exit, or maybe IPO for a very short amount of time and then exit. One of those two will be our solutions.
So IPO, I get that, but if it is an exit, what type of company could be your potential buyer?
Very good question. So any diagnostics company that are big, like Medtronic, Stryker, GE, Philips, Siemens. We've already spoken to Stryker, and they've shown some good interests in us. So those are the main types of companies. Maybe a lab company like a Quest or Roche, Abbott Labs, those types of companies might also want to acquire this is another type of diagnostics company, so they might be interested. But certainly those are the types of companies that we're looking at. And the added benefit is, sure, will we hire some distributors and supply companies that get the product into the hospital? Absolutely. But partnering up with these partners early on and then making them, having them be our partners for acquisition makes a lot of sense, because they can get us into every corner of every hospital of in the world, pretty much.
Great. How do you want the startup founder ecosystem to help you? What are you looking out? What is your ask to the founders community?
Well, are you talking about like the FDA and reimbursement, or?
No, I'm just talking about, you are a startup founder, you are building something great, which will help the humanity. There are so many other people doing it. You are based here, So what do you want from the community itself? What type of guidance, or is there something that you are looking for that, hey, if the community can help me, the startup founder community at large,
sure,
can help me, then it would.
Well, I won't lie about this. Number one would be fundraising. I mean, we definitely could use help with fundraising, which is challenging. It's very challenging in the medical device world, because everybody knows that there are many steps and hurdles. But we're trying to lower those hurdles by saying we don't need to go right to the FDA. I mean, we will start collecting data for the FDA, but we'll become a lab-developed test, LDT, first. In other words, something that guides pathologists, a pathologist's tool. So if we can bill ourselves that way, as opposed to a decision maker, an autonomous decision maker, The FDA 510K pathway doesn't need to be deployed right away, or at least it can be deployed right away, but that 2-year wait doesn't scare anybody off because we can generate revenue ahead of time. So that's one thing that we're thinking of that should promote investors to be interested and to de-risk the company that we're looking to raise funds for. So that would be helpful. Of course, any other SBIRs or non-dilutive funding that we could be introduced to, that would be very helpful. And then I did mention, anybody that, can introduce us to, we do have an ecosystem of some people that are involved in the reimbursement segment, and we have an FDA consultancy group, but more information there is always helpful as well. I think those are the main needs. And then, of course, there will be key hires that we'll need going forward. So, software developers, and we have our main guys on the inside, and they know people already to outsource this to in terms of hiring just a workforce, because they won't be able to do everything themselves. But any additional help, any qualified help, very good and qualified help is welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So
Dr. Rachel, at least on the talent side, R&D credit side, cap table management side, and all those things, we could be some help there. So
wonderful.
When you need them, please feel free to reach out. My
personally, I know how to reach you.
Yeah. I've been recruiting for last 25 years. I have 2 companies in that, one for, mid-sized to large-sized companies, and one for the startup talent. And we find talent all around the world. So, whenever.
Wonderful. So as soon as we're ready for that component, we'll definitely be reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then with that, all the best to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. It's been nothing but a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.